Hello, this is Leslie Palma-Samansek. I'm Director of Communications with Priests for Life, and I'm here in the Priests for Life studio with Father Frank Pavone, our National Director and author of the new, just published Abolishing Abortion, published in August by Thomas Nelson Publishers, the largest Christian publishing company in the world. Hello, Father.
Hi, Leslie. Good to be with you to discuss this exciting book.
So I have a few questions for you.
Yes, let's delve into the different aspects of this book.
All right, you have three main thematic sections to your book. Could you explain what they are?
Well, this I call a pro-life manifesto because I wanted to articulate the principles of the pro-life movement. What is its soul? What is its engine? What drives it? And to what goal? So the first part of the book establishes the principles the pro-life movement is fighting for. Then there's a middle section of the book which looks at the failures of the church in particular and also of the state. But I go into, when we talk about the failures of the church to live up to her responsibilities to defend the unborn, we look in a particular way at a very big obstacle, which is the false understanding of the limitations of the church when it comes to politics and elections. Can the church preach politics? Well, we go into this whole question of what limitations do we have because of our tax-exempt status. And as we know, there's a lot of self-censorship in the church, and we look very carefully at what the real limitations are, what the false limitations are, and how we can break through the self-censorship about losing our tax-exempt status and so forth. Then in the third main part of the book, I look at pro-life strategy in some detail: legislative strategy, public relations strategy. What are the tools that the pro-life movement needs to use, and the strategy according to which it needs to use them to get to the goal of ending abortion? So those are the three main thematic sections of the book.
All right. Well, you identify the first spiritual duty we have in responding to abortion, and surprisingly, it isn't prayer.
That's right.
What is it?
The first spiritual duty I identify to end abortion is repentance. We have to turn away from sin. Now, that doesn't only mean turn away from any kind of involvement in abortion, direct or indirect. It means turn away from the sin that manifests itself when we give in to our own fears, to our own doubts, to our own limitations, and we say, oh, I can't do this, or that'll be too much of a sacrifice if I step forward and speak for the unborn, or if I fight abortion, I'm going to lose friends, I'm going to lose popularity, I'm going to lose position. And these kinds of limitations we put on ourselves end up being more of an obstacle to ending abortion than the power of Planned Parenthood or the government or the pro-abortion movement. Repenting of our fears, repenting of our cowardice at times that we are subject to, repenting of our blindness, because even with those of us who are pro-life, the issue gets fuzzy. We lose the sense of urgency, the sharpness, if you will, of the call to defend the unborn can be blunted in our own minds and hearts. Repentance means constantly asking God for a broken heart. Lord, let my heart be broken over the tragedy of abortion, because then I'm going to find the courage to make the sacrifices necessary to fight it and end it.
All right. You say there's a great disconnect between our society today and the unborn child. What are some examples you can give of that disconnect?
We see the disconnect on a personal, individual level. We see the disconnect in the government. We see the disconnect in the church. And by disconnect, I mean we talk about human rights and we fail to protect the most fundamental right, which is life. We talk about helping the poor, the helpless, and the vulnerable, and somehow we forget about the unborn child. And the very people talking about helping the poor and the vulnerable, again, I'm talking about people both in the government and in the church, we talk about helping the poor and vulnerable, but we won't speak up for the unborn. And some of them are actually pro-abortion, or pro-choice, as they might say. So in the book, I cite a couple of concrete examples. Let me turn to two of them. We had in 2006, and amazingly, this particular member of Congress just did it again now in 2015 in anticipation of the visit of Pope Francis. Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro sent a press release in February of 2006, and she called it an historic Catholic statement of principles, expressing a commitment to the dignity of life and the belief that government has moral purpose. sounds great, right? And a whole bunch of her fellow Democrats signed on to this letter. But it shows the blind spot to the unborn, because the signers voted consistently to deprive children in the womb of protection, and yet you have all these quote-unquote pro-choice members of Congress saying, and here I quote, "We work every day to advance respect for life. We are committed to making real the basic principles that are at the heart of Catholic social teaching, helping the poor and disadvantaged, protecting the most vulnerable among us." Now, if that isn't a disconnect, if that isn't a blind spot, I don't know what is. They're saying they're protecting the most vulnerable, and they're not protecting the most vulnerable, the children in the womb. A similar disconnect that I document here in the book happened in 2009 on the campus of Notre Dame University, where I went at the invitation of some members of the senior class that didn't want to go to their own commencement ceremony. Why? Because President Obama was being honored at that commencement ceremony and given an honorary doctorate of law, a president who was the most pro-abortion president we've ever had. Why should a Catholic university give him such an honor? The Catholic bishops have said we should not give such honors to pro-abortion politicians. And yet, the president accepted it, and although a national controversy erupted as a result because of his stance on abortion, he continued to just step right into that scenario, and he spoke about abortion in the commencement address and tried to say that there is more than one valid position on this fundamental issue of the right to life. But then here's the disconnect, even more sharply illustrated. In his address at that commencement, he said the following words: "If there is one law that we can be most certain of, it is the Golden Rule, the call to treat one another as we wish to be treated." What happened to the Golden Rule applied to the children who are dismembered by abortion? So this is what I mean by the disconnect. I give other examples in the book, and we can see it all around us. And that's where we have to repent and begin to connect the dots that these children we're trying to save are real children who have real rights, and that's why we have to abolish abortion.
It's very compelling. You identify an irrepressible spiritual imperative that drives people to defend the unborn. What is that, and can you give us some examples from history?
If we go back to the beginning of the church and we look at the apostles, in the Acts of the Apostles, for example, they had an irrepressible spiritual imperative. They had a spiritual exclamation point right in the middle of their minds and hearts and souls. And they expressed it by saying, "We cannot help speaking about what we have seen and heard," referring, of course, to the death and resurrection of Christ. They were told not to preach about him, not to speak in his name. He was too controversial. The authorities were trying to snuff out this new way of life called Christianity. And the apostles said, "No, we are compelled to do this." And why were they compelled? Because they had physical contact with Christ. They saw him, they were in his presence, both before and after he died. They ate and drank with him after he rose from the dead, and they were witnesses to his resurrection. And this imperative brought them even to the point of martyrdom, willing to give their lives rather than to be silent about what they knew to be true. This imperative then continues in history for those who speak up for what is right and just. Another example of this spiritual imperative is in the efforts of Wilberforce to end the slave trade. And he had introduced time and again, year after year, in the Parliament, the measure to abolish the slave trade. And at one point, his colleagues are weary of the whole thing, and they say they should suspend the question. Let's not talk about this anymore, or let's put it off for some future time. And here was his response: "The question suspended? Is the desolation of wretched Africa suspended? Are all the complicated miseries of this atrocious trade, is the work of death suspended?" And so he identified with the physical suffering of the people he was trying to defend. Just as the apostles identified with the physical suffering and the physical resurrection of Christ. And so they had that imperative. And so it is with us, with the unborn. And that's the case I make, is that we in the pro-life movement, at its core, have this same irrepressible imperative for justice for the victims with whom we have come into contact. And that's what that refers to.
Each time a child is killed, many other people are wounded, and they may not even realize it. Mom and dad, grandparents, siblings, and friends all get hurt. Some of them grieve a life they helped to kill. Others grieve a life they tried to save but could not. Every abortion also hurts the abortionists themselves, who are dehumanized in the process. And abortion hurts the pro-life advocates who tried to stop it. They too must grieve the child who was killed. The wound of abortion is multifaceted, and therefore so is the healing. The Silent No More Awareness campaign has launched a new project to raise awareness about the many dimensions of the damage abortion does. Called Healing the Shockwaves of Abortion, this effort focuses each month on a different group of people who are wounded and need healing. Let's all promote this great symphony of healing. Visit abortionshockwaves.com for more information.
You compare the fight against abortion to the fight waged by our founding fathers. Please explain the connection.
America was not a country founded based on geography or the settlement of a particular group of people. It's a nation built on an idea, on a principle, that we have our rights from God and that government protects those rights and that anyone can come here to enjoy the protection of those rights. And it is an experiment that has flourished precisely because of that principle. The Founding Fathers recognized that they were fighting for the right to life, that they were standing up for God-given rights also of freedom and the pursuit of happiness. And so they pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor. They had to commit a high act of treason in signing the Declaration of Independence. They were putting their lives, they were putting their families, they were putting their possessions at great risk. They were committing treason against the king. And yet they did so because they realized that these principles, their popularity, or even their lives. That effort to get this country started, that recognition of the right to life as foundational, is the same dynamic happening in the pro-life movement. And this book is a call to make that same measure of sacrifice, to pledge our lives, our fortunes, our sacred honor, to show ourselves and the world there is nothing more important than standing up for the right to life. Everything else depends on that. So in a sense, you can say the very same dynamic behind the founding of this country is the dynamic behind the effort to abolish abortion.
In abolishing abortion, you assert that legalizing abortion has changed the type of government we have. What do you mean by that?
In 1973, the Supreme Court in Roe versus Wade legalized abortion. But they did not say we are allowing abortion because the unborn child is not a human being. If they had said that, they would have been wrong, but they at least would have preserved a principle of government, which is no government can authorize the killing of innocent human beings. It's beyond the scope, it's beyond the power, it's beyond the authority of government. And that's the kind of government our founders established, the kind that recognizes that it is to secure our rights, not to take them away. But Roe v. Wade didn't say that. Roe v. Wade said, this might be a human being. We're not sure. We're not competent to speculate as to the answer, but we're taking away protection from these children in the womb. They are not persons under the Constitution. In doing that, the court asserted the right, the government asserted its authority, so it presumes, to be able to kill innocent human beings, to authorize the killing of innocent human beings. That changes the nature of government. And in fact, in the book, I quote Pope St. John Paul II, and here's what he said about that in his 1995 encyclical, The Gospel of Life. He says, when a state legalizes abortion, he says, quote, the state is no longer the common home where all can live together on the basis of principles of fundamental equality, but is transformed into a tyrant state, which arrogates to itself the right to dispose of the life of the weakest and most defenseless members. And he goes on to call it a caricature, a tragic caricature of democracy and the death of true freedom. Really is a different type of government when you legalize the killing of the unborn. And the American bishops repeated the same theme 3 years after John Paul II wrote these words. The American bishops wrote Living the Gospel of Life, and they said that when the American government becomes an experiment on people rather than by them and for them, they said it will no longer be worth conducting. And then they said we are arguably moving closer to that day. This is powerful language, saying that this is not just one bad court decision or one bad law or one bad public policy. This is an attack on the very foundations of civilization itself. And that's why I say we have a different form of government once abortion is made legal.
You make reference to your personal and professional relationship with the family of Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. Can you describe how that intersects with the fight against abortion?
The more I became aware of the tragedy of abortion and of the efforts of the pro-life movement, the more I saw the parallels between this movement and the civil rights movement. Because Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in the civil rights movement was not just advocating for the rights of black people. He was doing that precisely because he was advocating for every human life, every human being. And he said very clearly that we cannot kill anybody when we recognize the sanctity of the human person. This movement, therefore, for the sanctity of the life of the unborn, for their equal protection under the law, is fueled by the very same principle that the civil rights movement was based on. It's just the same principle applied to a different group of victims. I recognized that, and then at a certain point in the development of my pro-life work, I heard that Dr. Alveda King, the niece of Martin Luther King Jr., the daughter of Martin's brother, A.D. King, was speaking out about pro-life. And so it turned out that we met at a pro-life conference at which we were both on the speaking program. And I said to her, we need to work more closely together. And she heard my talk in which I was quoting her uncle, and we developed a personal and professional relationship. And several years after that, she decided to join our pastoral team at Priests for Life full-time, and also to join our Silent No More awareness campaign because she herself has had 2 abortions. And so she speaks from the personal experience of abortion and also from the civil rights perspective that, yes, this pro-life movement is the civil rights movement of today. We've subsequently got to know her mom, who is also very pro-life, and various other members of her family who speak out for the unborn. And her mom, Naomi, actually spoke out for the unborn in our nation's capital at a prayer service in which we honored her, and she issued a statement called "The Beloved Community and the Unborn," which I quote in full in my new book. And let me just read a line here from it. Naomi King, sister-in-law of Martin Luther King Jr., said, "We must declare that these children too, the children in the womb, are members of the beloved community, that our destiny is linked with theirs, and that therefore they deserve justice, equality, and protection." So it has been a joy, continues to be a joy, to know the family, to be with them in many different events and occasions, and to join our voices together for justice, equality, and nonviolence, and that includes the babies in the womb.
You write at length in the book about the, quote, chilling effect of vague tax law. Please explain what that effect is.
The United States of America is supposed to function in such a way that the citizens govern themselves. And we govern ourselves also by being able, among other things, to elect those who serve in public office. And for elections to work, for democracy to work, the people need to, first of all, know the difference between right and wrong, know what's good for them and what's bad for them, and then elect leaders accordingly. So there has to be what the Supreme Court calls, and let me quote here from the court, a freedom of debate in the public square. In 1964, there was a case called New York Times versus Sullivan, and the court said that the right of citizens to advocate for particular issues reflects our, quote, profound national commitment to the principle that debate on public issues should be uninhibited, robust, and wide open. Now, there has come into being this provision of the tax law that says that churches and not-for-profit organizations cannot intervene in a political campaign. And I deal with this at length in the book because the question is, well, what does that actually mean? And the problem is that when the law was written, there was no legislative history or debate about it, and this particular provision was just inserted in the tax code in 1954. And so there's a lot of question about what it really means and where the boundaries really are. When has a pastor, for example, preaching in the pulpit, intervened in a political campaign? And the bottom line is that the closer you look at it, the less you know, because the IRS has its interpretations of this particular limitation, this particular prohibition on political intervention, and they say, well, it depends on all the facts and circumstances. Well, what kind of decisions do we make in life based on all the facts and circumstances? How can we know all the facts and circumstances of anything? It's absurd to think that we can. So basically, as I quote various constitutional attorneys and other experts, and in fact, I quote other decisions of the Supreme Court itself in my book that say that the result of this vagueness is self-censorship. If I'm not sure if or when I cross the line into illegal activity, well, then that's going to have a chilling effect on any activity that I might do. I'm going to try to stay far away from that line because, after all, I don't want somebody coming by 6 months later saying, "Oh, you violated the law. Now we're going to punish you or your church." And I take this on very, very seriously in the book, not because I think such punishment is going to happen. In fact, I argue just the opposite, that this is more bark than bite. There is no punishment happening. My argument is that when we think there's some kind of line there somewhere in the clouds that we're afraid to cross because we think there is going to be punishment, that a lot of things that we are able to say, we don't say. A lot of things we are able to do, we don't do. And that's what I mean by the chilling effect of tax law and bad interpretation of it.
Hello, brothers and sisters. Father Frank Pavone here, National Director of Priests for Life, joined by our Associate Director, Father Dennis Wild, and our Priest Associate, Father Stephen Imbarado. Fathers, thank you for your service to this great mission.
Hello, everybody. Great being here.
We want to talk to you today about the missionaries of the gospel of life, because the year 2017 is going to be a great year of growth for this particular aspect of our apostolate. What this means is very simple, that pro-life is a spirituality, and we offer a training program in that spirituality, a 10-month period of time when people immerse themselves in the study and practice of living as a pro-life missionary, a pro-life disciple of Christ. We just had 2 people who completed this process who made their public commitment in the presence of Father Stephen to live this out. And we have another 3 new people who have started the process. And we have over 200 people already publicly committed to
over
doing
250,
this.
yes.
And in all parts of the country and even around the world. Now, what is it that we're talking about here? What we're talking about is very simple. Pro-life is not just a movement or an ideology or a political platform. It is a spirituality. It's an aspect of following Christ, who tells us, love God, love your neighbor. Well, if we love God, we love the babies he created. If we love our neighbor, that means we also love our unborn neighbor. And that's it in a nutshell. Pro-life spirituality means that the Gospels, the teachings of the church, not only tell us why we have to be pro-life, they tell us how to be pro-life. In other words, there are certain virtues that we live as we seek to be in solidarity with our unborn brothers and sisters, to speak out with courage, to have compassion on the moms, the dads, even the abortionists, because they're not the enemy, they're captive to the enemy. There are virtues that shape this work and that sustain us, so that all we do in pro-life flows from our faith in God and our discipleship of Christ, and lead back to it and reinforce it. That's it in a nutshell. And Father Stephen, you've been, of course, coordinating now, is playing a special role in activating and guiding the MEVs.
That's right, my friends. Father Frank asked me a few months ago to coordinate the MEV program, and I'm very excited to be able to do that. And so Father Dennis and I are extending invitations to all MEVs who have made their promises already, or anyone out there who is interested in becoming an MEV, to invite us, to allow us to come to your parish, come to your area for days of recollection or weekend pro-life missions. And we can adapt the program to fit your needs. So we're hoping to see you in 2017. Again, 2017, the year of the MEVs, the Missionaries of the Gospel of Life.
Great. And one of the things I've enjoyed over the years, I've been with Priests for Life for 18 years now, and the growth of this whole idea, Father has a great rationale about the Missionaries of the Gospel of Life that you can find on our website. But one of the things I really enjoy is going to a parish and preaching at the weekend there, and one of those masses, at that time, we can have people that make their promises. This is very important, and it's a wonderful witness, you know, fathers? It's a wonderful witness to the people that are there because they see the reality of this and coordinating. It's not just priests, but the lay people that are coming forth, and they want to make special promises that in a special way, it's not that they're reinventing the wheel on the pro-life efforts that they're doing. Whatever they're doing already, they intensify that, and it's a beautiful thing to see that, and the people commented on it afterwards. The reason we wanted to get out to visit, obviously, is to see how you're doing and to give you a boost in spirituality. We all can grow from this, but to reinforce the spirituality that you have in the Missionaries of the Gospel of Life. That's number one. And the second thing, of course, is to find new people as well and to get ideas from you as to how we can coordinate. Because right now, we're pretty isolated in many ways. We look at the map and the number of people that are in the Missionaries of the Gospel of Life and the places all around the country, and as mentioned, not just the country, but in the world, is pretty isolated. So in some areas, there are pockets of 3 or 4, maybe 5, and it's great that you're getting together. I know that's happening in parts of Pennsylvania and other states as well. But this is something we need to coordinate, and we can coordinate eventually online. We can coordinate it as a process. We can even have a retreat online in a way. That's down the road a piece. But first, we'd like to get out to visit you and to reinforce what you're already doing and to give you that encouragement that we're all about.
So, brothers and sisters, be in contact with us. Now, we have a special website, missionariesofthegospeloflife.com, and that has all the information about everything we've said so far, a more in-depth idea of our spirituality, the steps in signing up for the training, and then, as Father Dennis and Father Stephen have said, invite us to your communities, to your parishes, to your pro-life events, so that we can speak about this to the people in your home area and get this message out and bring people into this beautiful process. So missionariesofthegospeloflife.com. Contact us today, and let's work together on this beautiful spirituality, and let's save lives and heal minds and hearts. So may the Lord bless you. May he send his Spirit upon you. May he protect you and your loved ones, and may he strengthen you in your pro-life work. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. God bless you all.
Thank you.
Welcome to the Catholic View for Women, news and views of interest to women discussed from a truly Catholic perspective. My name is Astrid Bene Gutierrez. I'm Director of Los Angeles Pregnancy Services and spokesperson of Hispanics for Life. And my co-host is Janet Marana, Executive Director of Priests for Life.
Thank you, Astrid.
And to my left is our co-host as well, Teresa Tamio of EWTN Radio. Catholic Connection is the name of the program.
Right.
Welcome, ladies.
Good to be here again. Great to be here.
Our topic today is women and the church through the centuries. So we have lots to talk about, beauty, art, and why don't we start with you, Janet?
Well, you know, there's an important quote came out of the Second Vatican Council, and I like to remind everyone that's in the 60s when the sexual revolution was exploding and the radical feminism. Let's see what the church had to say. The hour is coming, in fact has come, when the vocation of woman is being acknowledged in its fullness, the hour in which women acquire in the world an influence, an effect, and a power never hitherto achieved. Now, does that sound like a church that's oppressing women?
No.
Absolutely
and
not.
what you said is so important, the fact that this was put out there right in the midst of the whole,
Of that
quote-unquote,
whole-
sexual revolution,
Right.
women's lib movement. And the church was being maligned publicly
Exactly.
for allegedly taking the opposite view when nothing
Right.
could be further from the truth.
Yeah. And it's like we say, the truth of the church in these documents, it doesn't see the light of day. And I think that's one of the purposes of this program, is to
Right.
help women realize that the church has been on your side through the centuries
Right.
and empowering women.
And this truth really was brought out. Teresa, you were recently at a Vatican
Yeah,
Congress
it
for
was
women.
a pretty big deal. It was actually in 2008, Astrid, and it feels like just yesterday because I still can't believe I was actually invited. There were 260 delegates from around the world, and it was a Vatican Congress on Women. It was put on by the Pontifical Council for the Laity of the Vatican. And the whole idea was to look at women and how far we've come or haven't come since the issuing of the document by John Paul II, Mulieris Dignitatem, on the dignity and vocation of women, which we've quoted several times in the shows here for Catholic View, and we're going to quote again in this episode of the program. And the whole idea really was to look at the history of women in the church, to look at, as I said, where we've come since that document in 1988, the Papal Letter to Women, or Mulieris Dignitatem, and also the Papal Letter to Women, which was actually issued in 1995. But to say, okay, let's step back and let's assess how have women been treated in society since these documents have come out, and what about over the centuries? So we went back and we looked at women in Scripture, and we looked at women in the culture, and we looked at the saints such as St. Catherine of Siena and St. Teresa of Avila and
her.
doctors
Wonderful.
of the church. And what I thought was so fascinating is, again, in every area, and it's not expressed as well as it should be, as Janet, as you just pointed out, but in every area, the church is always doing what it can to uplift, uphold, and honor women.
That's right.
Yes.
And yet, it's not, and sometimes we've been our worst known enemies because we need better communication skills in terms of getting the message out there, and there have been problems and scandals, and we have to admit to that, so there at times has been a credibility issue. But overall, the church has always been teaching.
That's right.
And
We have
those
to-
teachings have been
Yes.
benefiting women.
We have to shed light on these wonderful examples. In my community, the Hispanic community, there are some amazing examples of women that are just incredible. There's one particular woman that I absolutely love, and during my reversion, I really learned about her life and her writings. Her name is Concepcion Cabrera de Armida. She's known...
Can you say that again?
Concepcion, I know, isn't it
I'm glad I
amazing?
didn't have to pronounce that
She's
one.
got a nickname,
It's
though.
so beautiful.
She's got a
It rolls
nickname.
right off your tongue.
Concepcion Cabrera de Armida, and she's lovingly known as Conchita.
Oh.
And
Oh, that's
she-
easy. I can get the
Conchita,
part.
and she's amazing. She lived in the first part of the 20th century. She was a mother, a wife, as well as a spiritual foundress of an order of priests and sisters, the missionaries of the Holy Spirit. So here we have a person living, over a century ago, but she was so fruitful, and so she contributed so much. And like her, so many women are in our church. We have to shed light on these amazing examples of women, and they served so joyfully, and they were happy because they had God. So these are really just shining examples that we have to put out there.
I got one for you from Italy, from my roots.
Italia.
St. Gianna Beretta Molla.
That's right.
Pediatrician, wife, mother, gave her life for her child. I mean, awesome. And she's a great example because she was in the 20th century, and she was a working woman and a mom, and she was so involved in the church from Milano.
She gave her life.
She's from Milan, I think, or Turin, but anyway, northern Italy, and she gave her life for her child. But also, she's a great example of what it means to be just everything a woman could be. You know how we always said the women's lib thing was, oh well, you can be in the House or the Senate, or you could stay in the kitchen, or you could bring home the bacon and fry it up in a pan, whatever.
But here she did both. I mean, she was a doctor.
Oh yeah, and then she was very
mother.
involved in working with charities to help underprivileged children who couldn't afford. I mean, an incredible woman who lived in the 1950s, and what a great example.
Exactly.
And we don't hear about
being
these women.
Christ-like. I mean, she's truly Christ-like. She gave her life. I mean, and really, what an example of really giving up her life for the life of her child. I mean, that's a tremendous example of a heroic love. And there's so many saints in my childhood. I love to hear stories of Saint Agnes of God. I love to hear a story of my patron, Saint Maria Goretti. Just this heroic love that we're all called to live out in different ways. So the church really proposes so many wonderful examples, inspiring models for our young women as well.
One of the things that we've done, in addition to getting the camera crews out to the various areas to interview women on the street in their daily walks of life, we also talked to some experts. And we had Dr. LaFranchi on our program, Dr. Janet Smith, and we also had Katrina Zeno. I had the opportunity to interview her when I was in the Phoenix Diocese last year, speaking for Bishop Olmsted, who's an amazing bishop. He's just incredible. He's doing so many great things.
Katrina, I think, is a pretty good expert on theology of the body.
Theology of the body, the feminine genius. She writes a lot about John Paul II's teachings on women, and she was at the conference that I gave and got a chance to talk to her, and then we also had a chance to do a quick interview. And what we were asking the women who were at this diocesan event where I was speaking is to talk about a couple of different things in terms of not only why we needed a program like this, but also, what about beauty, and what does that mean to you as a woman? And what does the church say about beauty and true feminine beauty? Let's see what Katrina has to say about that.
What do you have to say? 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 What do you have to say?
So what does it mean to be a Catholic woman in today's culture? What a fabulous question. Because I love being a Catholic woman in today's culture, and I especially love being a single Catholic woman in today's culture because people don't know what to do with me. That's really kind of rather fun. Because people expect a Catholic woman to be rather dull, to not really have many interests, to be kind of retiring and shy, and actually the opposite. People who know me know I love to dance tango. I love the beach. I love water. I love all kinds of things to do. I love hiking. I love learning Spanish. And so for being a Catholic woman in our culture today means I take all those things that I love to be as a single woman, and I take them wherever I am. And I take them as a Catholic, meaning as someone who is passionately in love with Jesus Christ. And so what that means is it informs everything that I do. Not that I'm going to talk about Jesus in every tango dance that I have, but it means it makes a difference of when people ask me what I do, or when they ask me what did I do last weekend, or what my goals are in my life. They always have to do with how I can increase my faith, how I can be more humble, how I can draw closer to God, and how I can serve His church. And so being a Catholic woman today means figuring out how I can bring Jesus Christ into whatever setting I am as a woman and in whatever cultural situation I'm in.
I just think it's great to get women like Katrina, who are so well educated in theology and understand the church teachings, to explain to us that there is such a beauty in women, and not just in our appearance, but in our whole dignified, persona, and how the church lifts us up. It's just incredible.
And an example of that is in Mulieris Dignitatem, a wonderful writing of John Paul II. I want to read this wonderful, powerful quote about what Christ really thinks of women. It says, "In all of Jesus' teaching, as well as in his behavior, one can find nothing which reflects the discrimination against women prevalent in his day. On the contrary, his words and works always express the respect and honor due to women. The woman with a stoop is called a daughter of Abraham, while in the whole Bible the title son of Abraham is used only of men. Walking the Via Dolorosa to Golgotha, Jesus will say to the women, "Daughters of Jerusalem, do not weep for me." This way of speaking to and about women, as well as his manner of treating them, clearly constitutes an innovation with respect to the prevailing custom at the time.
That is so huge,
Amazing.
because
Right.
if we start really just right from Scripture, and we talked about this in previous episodes
That's
of how
right.
Jesus treated women, and then we look at this over the centuries, and this is what we studied when we were in Rome for the Vatican Congress, and the wonderful former Vatican ambassador Marianne Glendon has written about this as well, that the Church actually has been a champion of women and women's rights over the centuries, especially, for example, with marriage, because it was the Church, I think it was right after the Council of Trent, that fought against polygamy and fought against also arranged marriages and felt that the woman should have an equal say into who she married. And so these are the kinds of things that the Church has been doing over the centuries. Now, again, as we said earlier, not that the Church, and we know through the writings of the great Catherine of Siena, a doctor of the Church, and also St. Teresa of Avila, that there were a lot of issues that were going on with the hierarchy. We've had those over the centuries, and we can't ignore those. But at the same time, the Church is still the Church.
Exactly.
And the core teachings and the way that she has always uplifted women is just still something
prevails.
so beautiful
Absolutely.
that we need to get out there on a regular basis.
Right.
You know? Well, I think we're going to take a break, and then when we
Exactly.
come back, we are going to hear from someone who knows all about how the Church treats women, especially in art. And
Art
she's someone
history.
who's familiar to the EWTN viewers because she actually had a program, and it may still be running in EWTN. And she works in Rome, and I'll tell you more about Liz Lev, who happens to be the daughter of Marianne Glendon.
Wonderful.
Look at that. So, you know, the fruit doesn't fall far from the tree.
That's right.
And I had a chance to interview her when she was in Detroit not too long ago about the Church and how the Church gives us this incredible view of women through art. And I'll also tell you about a trip I took in December of last year where we had the opportunity to see true feminine beauty in religious art. So stay tuned. Well, welcome back. This is the Catholic View for Women. Teresa Tomeo, Astrid Bennett Gutierrez, and Janet Morana. We're all co-hosts of this program, talking about views and news from a truly Catholic perspective, things that matter most to we as women in the Catholic Church. And in this segment of our program, we're talking about true beauty, the dignity of women, and women over the centuries in the Church. And as I mentioned, I had the opportunity to go and I lead tours. I go to the Holy Land quite frequently,
That's
as
right.
you know, and go to my favorite spot on the planet, which is Italy, as often as I can get there.
Me too.
My
I
mother-in-law
love it.
teases me, and she says I go there for a cup of coffee. I said, there's an idea.
Yeah.
A cappuccino or espresso.
And of course, the pasta there is fantastic.
It's amazing. But that's a whole other show.
Exactly.
God willing.
Absolutely.
Someday.
Cooking show.
It's a cooking show. But it was interesting because this was a different tour, and we took women, only women. Well, Dominic came along for the tail end of it. But it was all about feminine beauty in the arts.
Wow.
And it was a chance for us to see, okay, you know, here the world says this church is so oppressive and doesn't like women and wants to keep women down. Then everywhere you go in Italy, well, you know, you've been there.
Oh, absolutely.
Every time you turn the corner, there's another church and there's another statue, you know, dignifying a woman or a saint.
And they're
beautiful.
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 Every
And
corner.
women
Absolutely
are
beautiful.
portrayed so
They
gracefully.
are.
And the flowing clothes, and they're attractive, and they're shapely. They're not twigs. I mean, they look like normal,
Women.
healthy women.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And so we decided, you know, we should, with all the art that is out there that uplifts women and shows our true dignity, we should put a tour together. And my husband and I are members of the Vatican Patrons of the Arts, which is a great organization to join. And basically what we do is just support the Vatican in refurbishing and putting this art out there for the world to engage the culture. And I said, let's get Liz Lev, who is, you know, an incredible art history professor in Rome, and she writes for Zenit, and she's very prominent over there teaching in the universities, and she leads tours and knows so much about this topic of feminine beauty in the arts. And she was in Detroit speaking recently, and so I had the opportunity to interview her and to talk about comparing how the Church views women, especially in art, to how the world puts women out there. So let's see what she had to say.
I think for me, one of the things that really struck me as a Catholic and an art historian, and really awakened a sense of being a Catholic and an art historian, was particularly in the Vatican museums and the Sistine Chapel, seeing all these extraordinary renderings of women who are heroic, women who are powerful, women who are, you know, strong enough to stand beside and to act alongside men. It amazed me to think that a place like that, painted so long ago, would be able to speak to, you know, a woman from 20th century, now the 21st century. So that's one aspect of it. But the other thing about walking through the Vatican Museum, walking through the whole body of Christian art, is how the Christians have explored these different visions of women over the years. You've seen Mary as this ethereal, almost untouchable, just splash of exotic, mesmerizing color, and we've also seen Mary as, the mother of God holding her son, contemplating the body of her son. We've seen her as her most human, we've seen her at her most ethereal, we've seen her in all these wonderful different ways, which is the great gift of an art that's so universal that every artist has been able to envision these figures from our salvation in their own unique way and add to this great body of imagery.
And you, I know, doing this for so long as an art history professor, but taking people on so many tours, I'm sure you've probably seen the light go on, especially for women maybe who are objectified in the culture or have been objectified themselves, maybe through abortion or contraception, and then finally get it when they're going through these museums. Can you share what that's like for you as an art historian, as a tour guide, to see women who are understanding really who they are in Christ?
I think it's a very interesting thing to see. It's something that's very delicate, of course, because you deal with people's. You're talking about art, and all of a sudden people's real life experience comes into play, and so it becomes much more on the surface. It's much more sensitive, and so one of the more startling things is to see how many women come into this church with this idea that the church hates women and the church dislikes women, oppresses women. And you sort of stop in the middle of the room and you look around and could you explain to me what is oppressive or exploitive about the way that Michelangelo renders the Sibyl in the ceiling, or the way that Raphael represents the muses in the Raphael rooms, the way that Mary seems to be the number one subject matter, not a Mary who's half-dressed, not a Mary who has to show off or physicality in order to be attractive, but Mary who is beautiful in that gentle face, Mary who is beautiful for the way she interacts with her son. Really, and it tends to really take people completely by surprise. They find themselves flustered, they find themselves a little bit quieter as they begin to rethink. It's a wonderful ambassador for the concept of the church and women, the art of Christianity.
What breaks your heart, and the last question, the most when you look at the culture today? You have daughters, you have children, and you see how women are being objectified versus what you come in contact with in your work as a art historian, the beauty, the dignity, the queen of our Blessed Mother, all those beautiful things, and we look at the culture and we see how women are so objectified every single day.
I think what wounds me as a mother and wounds me as a woman who's had to work, had a career as well, is this idea that somehow we have progressed somewhere in these past 20, 30, 40, 50 years where women hyper-sexualize themselves in television, in the media, in the workplace, all around you, and somehow consider that empowering or liberating or representing womanhood. I don't understand this kind of representation that's been forced on women, where you must be somehow sort of control of your sexuality is really just as simply putting the goods out onto a shelf where it looks almost like a bargain shelf. Whereas when you look at the preciousness and the care that an artist made in representing a body of a woman, the way that he would clothe her and drape her in either the simplest of forms and these beautifully flattering folds, and the way she'd be represented inside this nature, or Mary inside one of her beautiful thrones, or represented in mosaic, this endless way that art has had to represent the beauty and the uniqueness and the specialness of women. It just seems very cheap and tawdry and such a sad concept of progress.
Teresa, I just love that. I mean, just the way that the artist depicted the women, the saints, and art really represents something beyond just the physical beauty, which is there. Right. It's also a spiritual beauty that's timeless, that's eternal.
It's a reflection of God in creation.
Absolutely. And so this art reflects the dignity that women have and our calling as well, as mothers, as grandmothers, and the beauty is just something that's universal. And this art, I think, really does help to show what the church really has taught through the centuries about who women
really are. Absolutely. And I think, looking back on the programs that we've done so far, really just giving women just a taste of what the church has to offer. I mean, there's so much. I know that Jen and I, you've heard our testimonies, and we've shared some of our stories with our viewers. But when we came back to the church, and I think you felt this way too, we were like, where have we been all these years? And there's so much to dive into, and so
it's a treasure.
And I feel
treasure chest.
it's an ongoing experience.
It is.
You know, I never stop learning. Every day there's something else I'll read, either in the scriptures or a document or a paragraph here or there. And it's just like, oh my goodness. And when you think about it, I wasted 20 years that I could have been learning all this stuff.
We're blindfolded somehow.
What people should realize is it's never too late. Right. You know, anyone watching this program,
I don't care how old you are.
That's right. No matter how old you are, whether you know you're a grandma and you're helping out with the grandkids now and then, or maybe you know elderly or whatever, it's never too late to begin reading these documents.
And also, it's never too late to find your vocation. If you are still on this planet, God's not through with you yet, so He's got a plan for you.
Exactly.
And it could be married life, it could be religious life, it could also be single life. There's so many needs in the world, and we really have to really take back what it means to be a woman, to be fruitful, to be a blessing and a light to the world, truly be Christ-like and give life spiritually and as well as physically.
And to be in the world and not of the world, but really
right.
to understand and to stop and think about this. You know, I think it was Chesterton who said this thing called the Catholic Church, and to go back and to look at what we have.
It's a treasure.
In this faith, and say, okay, what, you know, because when I stopped and really started to contemplate and say, well, maybe I should go back to my Catholic roots, it was just an incredible first step in a journey that continues.
Yeah, and you know, there's just so many books and documents out there that cover these subjects, and as we know, the Religious Catalog has a huge selection of them. And what better way for a grandma to give the granddaughter a nice birthday present of one of these a good book, you know, from the church, that they begin to, like, don't wait till, like, we had to wait all these years.
Right.
You know, that's one thing a grandma can do, pass on the knowledge to their grandchildren.
The
and say,
books?
You know, get them a good book, one of these Catholic teaching books.
Well, think about all the resources we've given over the past
all the homework
5
assignments,
including this episode. But we've talked about Humana Vitae, Evangelium Vitae, the Vocation of Women, the Papal Letter to Women. We've talked about the guidebooks that you have at Priests for Life for Humana Vitae. You've mentioned several books and several authors, Jason Everett and also Patrick Coffin. My book, Noise, Truth for Teens, my testimony book, Newsflash. This is all available at the EWTN catalog. You can order everything through EWTN. And you know, all the resources are going to be on the website too. The Catholic View for
as
Women.
a reminder of
So
what to
go
order.
back and look at some of these things. Obviously, you can't get everything all at once, but I would really recommend working with some of these documents, especially the Papal Letter to Women.
I mean,
Humana Vitae.
it has made all the difference for me when I was 23. I mean, reading these amazing books and discovering EWTN and watching, especially for me, it was hearing the Catholic convert stories, Edith Stein. I mean, all these stories that really, it made a huge difference for me. And EWTN has all these not only books but DVDs that we can share, and it really will make a huge difference.
And we've been talking about the saints and prominent people throughout the centuries. You know, what better way too is to have an image or a picture or a statue of pick your favorite female saint and have that in your home. I always think of Mother Angelica, who used to say to me, I said, Mother, there's so many statues and pictures here at every room you come in at EWTN. And she says, well, Janet, there's enough things in the secular world to divert you. We need to keep your attention on the things that are important so you stay focused and you don't get drifted, you know? So that reminds me of how we started our little mini-series here with our image of the Madonna of the Kitchen. So I'd like to bring her back up and remind everybody that, you know, she's a great addition to your kitchen table. And as we know, she has the keys, which will keep the home safe and locked, but it's also the keys that could open the kingdom. They open that gates to heaven.
She's beautiful, and she's a expression of art, like we're talking about.
That's right. See how the flowing, the draping of the gown, just like what Liz Love said, the beauty of the
We only
art.
have about a minute and a half left, so we want to tell them that the Madonna is also available at the EWTN catalog. Now, we were on Father Mitch's show last year launching this program. They sold out of their stock, and they had so many on back order. So make sure you get your copy of the Madonna of the Kitchen.
And of course, for the homework assignment, you need to go to our website, thecatholicviewforwomen.com. All our resources are listed there, and please send us your feedback. We want to hear from you. What kind of programs you would like to see us continue with? Tell EWTN, tell us on our feedback form, what topics and questions we can discuss. Friend us on Facebook, like the program.
Share the program as well.
That's right.
Right, because I'm sure this will be available on DVD as all of their programs are at EWTN. And this could be a great learning tool to sit down with your daughters and your granddaughters, or with your Bible study group, your women's Bible study group, to sit and go through the different episodes that we've done so far.
Have them over for coffee and cake,
Coffee.
Teresa.
Have them over for coffee.
Wonderful.
Can we talk?
Yes.
Can we talk?
Well, what a great privilege it has been to
That's
work
right.
with you ladies on this series. And
This has
God
been
willing,
wonderful.
this will continue. And we're just so grateful for EWTN to take us up on this project and to produce this for us. And
That's
we're
right.
just so
Very blessed.
What a great
blessing.
experience.
This is.
I hope
All right.
everybody liked it, and we hope we can.
Hope we can be back.
Absolutely.
And again, Janet, we want to send women to the website, correct?
That's right. thecatholicviewforwomen.com.
All right. Well, thanks. I guess I'll wrap up for Astrid Bennett Gutierrez and Janet Morana. I'm Teresa Tomeo. You can listen to me on the radio every morning at 9 o'clock on EWTN Global Catholic Radio. God bless you. And don't forget to visit our website, thecatholicviewforwomen.com.
Dear Elizabeth, I never thought that I would be writing you.
Dear David, I am so sorry I haven't written you until now.
My dear Michael, I feel such regret.
Janie, I miss you so much.
Dear Leah,
Dear Andrew,
Dear Lindsay,
dear Anthony, dear Jessica,
John,
Anna Maria,
James,
Lisa,
Zoe, Eric,
Sarah,
Daniel,
Hope.
Last night, I finally saw you, and I realized how much I miss you.
I've always had so much to say to you, but I didn't realize it. It's like I couldn't admit that you were real.
I always had this pain, this emptiness. And I would say, maybe if I just work harder, maybe this pain would go away. If only I could just try harder and do more, I wouldn't have this emptiness.
I have really suffered, and I have hated myself so much. I feel like I have wasted so much time.
I regret that I will never see your first steps or be able to take you to your first day of school.
I watched your mother's eyes go dull. I watched her stare out the window. I know she wanted to talk to me about it, but I just couldn't handle it.
After that day, everything changed. I didn't care about anything anymore. I just wanted to escape everything in my life. I kept running, and I didn't realize why.
Why did this happen? How can I feel such remorse from losing someone I never saw? How can I ever be forgiven?
You will never get to play with your brothers in the yard or pick flowers at your grandma's house. You will never see the sky or feel the wind on your face.
I was supposed to be the strong one. I was supposed to protect my wife. I was supposed to protect you.
I will not get to help you pick out your prom dress. And I will never get to see how beautiful you look on your wedding day.
I'm so angry that I let this happen.
Please forgive me. I was so scared. I just didn't know what to do.
After this weekend, I understand. It has been so lonely and so difficult. But after being here, I can see that I am loved.
I know you're in my life now. It's become so clear.
I finally have peace.
I forgive myself.
I know I am forgiven. Thank you. Thank you so much.
I love you, Elizabeth.
Love always. Dad.
Yours forever, Mom.
Love, Mommy.
Love, Mom.
Dad.